Hey everybody, this is Ryan Ferns, West Virginia's Senate Majority Leader and representative of the 1st Senatorial District, which is the Northern Panhandle. And I want to give a video update today, and I'm not doing a live video because this update is going to be a little lengthier than my typical update, so bear with me. I typically try to keep these between 2 and 3 minutes, but today what I want to cover is going to take a little bit longer. I want to map out a timeline for you. So, over the course of the last couple of weeks, as we've been working on this budget issue and we've been talking a lot about tax reform, these are things that I talked about all the way throughout the session. But I think as of late, it's become a little difficult to follow, and there's been a lot of misinformation out there. And I've heard from some people in my district and also some of my House colleagues from around the state concerns and desires about passing a balanced budget with no tax increases. So what I wanted to do, just to simplify things and clarify for everybody back at home in the Northern Panhandle, is start back from the beginning of the session, map out a timeline, and talk about what actions have actually been taken by both the House and the Senate and the Governor's office. So starting back at the beginning of the session, that's February 8th, it was the first day of the session, the Governor gave his State of the State address. And much to our surprise, different than what he had announced prior to the start of the session, the Governor proposed a $450 million tax increase. Now that was no tax reform, it was pure increase. As we looked at a significant sales tax increase, he had a B&O tax, he lumped professional services in, we had a telecommunications, and a few other things that basically amounted to $450 million. So, me being conservative, was alarmed by this. It was the largest tax increase in the history of the state. And so, as you know, I was very critical of that plan. A few weeks passed, February 27th, the Governor comes out with a new plan. This time it's a $400 million tax increase. Some of those other taxes that he had proposed earlier, he lowered, and he added in a cigarette tax and a tax on all sugary drinks. Still not a viable option to me. It's still a massive tax increase on hardworking men and women in West Virginia, something that I don't feel like in today's day and time they can afford, quite frankly. So I remained extremely critical of that plan, as you all know. March 13th, after the House and the Senate majorities have had some time to formulate a plan, we got together and the Republicans in the House and the Senate held a joint press conference. And in that press conference, the main point that we outlined is that we are going to live within our means. We are going to pass a budget that doesn't increase taxes and only spends the revenue that the state is actually going to collect. No new taxes. That's what the House and the Senate announced to everyone in the state at that press conference. March 29th, the Senate, after spending a tremendous amount of time debating where to apply those cuts to government, where we could shrink government, restrain government spending, March 29th, the Senate passes a balanced budget with no tax increases. Now keep in mind, as of March 29th, there's still 12 days left in the session. Okay, so we passed it on that date. There was $175 million in cuts to state government. That is not an easy task. That is making significant impact into the services that the state provides. Something that was extremely challenging to do, but we did it because that's what we said we were going to do. We passed that bill and sent it over to the House. Also at that time, the Senate Committee on Tax Reform had been working on a bill, and we passed a tax reform bill that gave a significant cut in the income tax to all working men and women in West Virginia. It raised some other taxes to offset some of that, but the net result was a $120 million tax cut to working men and women in West Virginia. It also restored some of the cuts in the previous budget that we had passed. So that was sent over to the House. Again, 12 days remaining. No action was taken by any member of the House on either one of those bills. Not the balanced budget that didn't raise taxes, and not the tax reform plan that cut in the income tax to working men and women in West Virginia. No action for 12 days. However, at that time, during that time period, the members of the House did see fit to discharge a medical marijuana bill to the House floor, and they did pass that. So no action on the balanced budget with no tax increases, but medical marijuana was discharged to the floor and passed. So they had two separate options at that point. No action was taken. April 8th is the last day of the session. The Senate passes yet another budget. had less cuts to it, and the remaining portion of the budget was filled in with rainy day money. The House also passed that, and the session adjourned. And as we all know, a little time later, the governor vetoed that budget. And so between April 8th and May 4th, Senate leadership, House leadership, and the governor's office got together and tried to work on a compromise that everybody could agree upon. The governor had made it very clear that he didn't like the budget that we had passed during session. He wasn't willing to accept it. We didn't have the numbers to override his veto, and so we had to attempt to work on a compromise. Much to my surprise, as everyone who watches these videos knows, I've been extremely critical of the governor since he's taken office, since the beginning of legislative session. But much to my surprise, the governor actually agreed to adopt the Senate's tax reform plan. This is the tax reform plan that cuts the income tax to working men and women in West Virginia, and also puts triggers in place so that each year as we go on, regardless of the future of the state, we continue to decrease that income tax to grow and have the opportunity for economic prosperity and job creation in West Virginia. So that was a surprise to me. He agreed to that, and on May 4th, the governor called us back in for a special session. The Senate again passed that tax reform bill, sent it over to the House, and the House actually rejected that bill. Now, they had the option to take that bill up and change it and offer an alternative plan, but that wasn't the action that was taken. The House rejected it, and we adjourned again. We adjourned for 10 days at that point. So between May 5th and May 15th, and I think this is where things started to get confusing, because people were saying, why is the House rejecting the Senate's tax reform plan? And I heard, I read a lot on social media about the various rationales behind why that was rejected. And I think where it got real confusing is when some of my colleagues in the House attempted to lump the governor's road bill in with our tax reform bill and labeled it as a tax increase. But those are in fact two very separate bills, and they also go to two very separate funds. One goes to general revenue and one goes to the road fund. So there's nothing that precluded anyone from voting on one and not the other. But nonetheless, that's where we were at. So between May 5th and May 15th, that's the 10 days that we had off, House, Senate, and Governor continue to work on a compromise. We heard a lot of concerns from House leadership, and I think our Senate leadership attempted to accommodate some of those concerns, modified our tax reform plan, and that brings us kind of to where we are today. We made some changes to that tax reform plan that still has the overall goal of cutting the income tax in order to lead to job creation, economic growth in West Virginia. It's stretched out over a couple years now. But like I said, it accommodated some of those concerns. We passed that over, and we're now awaiting action from the House. But I just want to reiterate that the Senate is the only body at this point to have passed a balanced budget with no tax increases. No action was taken anywhere else on that legislation, and that was well in advance of the end of the regular session. So I just want to make that clear for all those people out there that are clamoring for a balanced budget with no tax increases. It was an option. It was available, and no action was taken. So that brings us to where we are today. We'll wait and see what action the House takes from here, and I'll continue to keep you updated. Thanks for listening in.